Hello, and welcome to the Coaches Corner, brought to you by the Endurance Lab, where the coaches from the lab recap the week and answer a couple questions from you from the forum. My name's Jason Flores, one of the Endurance Lab coaches, and today I'm joined with Coach Taya Friedstead, Andrea Cullen, and Ian Murray. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, there was a time where I would do fun ice-breaking questions here at the beginning, and so I wanted to ask the coaches, what was the most unique thing you had in your grocery cart the last time you went to the grocery? We'll start with Miss Taya Friedstead.
The most unique?
Like, kind of like, oh, that is odd to just.
Well, there's always odd things when I take the kids with me. Gosh, I don't think I had anything odd other than some saltwater taffies, which I never eat. That are my daughter's favorite.
Yeah, there you go. How about Andrea? This week has been full of consumptions. So, what is your?
Well, we have a very large Polish community here, and I'm kind of tentatively exploring all of what's over that section of the store.
She's gonna go get it.
Smoked, cooked pork ribs.
Oh, interesting.
And I thought, oh my God, were they good? So yeah, they were a win. Yeah, the Polish are very good at meat, but the way it was packaged kind of didn't instill a lot of confidence. So we chucked them on the barbecue, and they were very good. So yeah, that was what was different.
So any packaged meat over there, Ian?
Well, I mean, I'm moving still, so I guess so. We had to try and fill the fridge up for the week and a half that we're here. But you know, we're pretty much, we make a list, we go in, we stick more or less to the list, and we're creatures of habit. So we don't get out of the ordinary too often, especially, you know, coming up on a race here in a couple weeks. I start really doing the basics of rice, some meat, some vegetables. You know, it's the same thing over and over. I'm pretty boring in that as it goes. But I'm trying to think the weirdest thing I had. I mean, I guess we stopped by Whole Foods the other day. I got a snickerdoodle cookie and a chocolate chip cookie. Those were in my cart.
Nice.
Those aren't weird though. That's, I would call health food.
Yes, health food. It's, you know, the
mental health food.
Mental health food. Yeah, we rarely do. We don't do too many treats. We call with our 5-year-old. We call the treats come from the universe. So they don't come from the pantry. So we got these dark chocolate peanut butter cups, and you guys have got to try it if you haven't tried it from Trader Joe's. If you have one close by.
Oh, we've had them.
Yeah.
We have them here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So definitely something when they go into the cart, because of the whole that and a couple other things for the kids for the party this weekend. Some natural fruit roll-ups and things like that. We don't usually see at the house, but Ryland's pretty excited about that. So, all right, well, let's jump into the lab. We had a pretty big week. Remember, we do build on a 3-week cycle, and we are on that second week. That means our riders are questioning why they signed up with us and why their legs and bodies are just so tired. But we'll jump straight over to Ian. He's going to give us an update on strength and the multi-sport side of the Endurance Lab.
Nice, Jason. So we kept the strength pretty light this week, with mostly stretching and basic core workouts because of our the difficulty of this week. From the multi-sport side, we did 8x800, which is always a brutal workout. It's a lot of fun. It brings people to near vomiting, which is what I call success. Sometimes it brings you to vomiting, which is like great success. It means you're able to push that deep. And that's a really hard one. And in the pool, we did 10x100 IM with 3x200. And I'm curious to see who actually was able to get to the 10x100 IM who does not come from a swimming background. For us adult onset swimmers, it's tough to get through a 10x100 IM set. Shoot, it's tough to get through a 1x100 IM set sometimes. And then we ended up the week with a 3x800 swim, and that was geared more towards our long course triathletes. You know, for 3x800 is a pretty good workout. We kept a good pace on it, but it wasn't. It's not so much that it's going to completely destroy you, but you definitely got out of the pool a little bit tired.
Awesome. Definitely good there. And then going over to Taya here for the skills. These workouts definitely packed a punch this week. We talked a little bit about it at the end of last week, Coach's Corner, where riders who have had this in their schedule have called some of these the hardest workouts they've done inside or outside the endurance.
Yeah, so the goal is, as we finish up the week before recovery week, is to really push the legs. And that's what we did this week. So we had the pick up the pace workout, which was 3 by 10 minutes progression, going from 80% to 115% of FTP. And this is really a much more effective way of building, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, building speed and strength instead of just doing steady state workouts. And then at the end of that workout, we had some pressure sprints where you start pretty hard and then you get out of the saddle and sprint. Then we had the VO2 explosion, which was designed to get your legs to go to failure. And if you watched the video for that workout before doing it, you knew exactly what to do. And I know that many of you did because of your posts on the forum. So, and then we close with the kitchen sink, which's got everything wrapped together, and should be a great last workout for the week here.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. Having gone through the key workouts here just a couple days ago, it definitely has the pressure putting on the legs. VO2 is a really great workout to really dump it all out there and pick up the pace. I think we had a couple riders do it live, and it was definitely entertaining to watch riders really push. So it was a good time. All right, some great workouts there. Week two. So let's move over to hot topics in the lab. I'm actually going to kick this off with a little bit in the feed zone. I'm going to bring back a quick topic here. I wanted to kind of put in your ear, or have at least a short conversation about making sure that riders are considering real food, depending on their rides or their training, to think about real food for your race as well as your training. Just a quick primer of this is just a quick sports fuel history. Just in the very short period of time in the last, I'd say, couple decades here, there's been a huge uptick in a lot more processed foods. So really, until like the 1970s, companies like Gatorade there were no sports drink. People were just drinking water and things like that, very simple things. But prior to 1986, there wasn't even any power bars or any bars that really had nutrition on them. And so really gels and that sort of thing debuted at the Hawaii Ironman in about 1988, if you can imagine. So that's a very, very short time where fueling has kind of existed. So really there was just a very small group of really maverick scientists that were looking to really simplify the food. And it was out of all places, the University of Montana. And they were looking to see if they carefully selected different items, from here and there, could they fuel just as effectively one way or the other? And that's where this kind of idea had come from. So really, when they found out that you could fuel really either way, whether it be through nutrition, through the normal ways versus trying to just get a certain amount of calories and getting the ratios correct, they kind of stumbled upon making these things that had easily digestible carbohydrates and proteins and fats. They could get the body to respond in a similar way. And that was essentially the birth of sports nutrition in the way we see it now, as far as like easily digestible packaged type foods. And so essentially when they moved over to cheap and widely available foods, they're not marked specifically as sports scientific foods, but really we just need to make sure that we are just wanting to counterbalance a lot of these overhyped marketing things and making sure that we are choosing sports nutrition that makes a sense for what we're trying to do, and not only our endurance goals, but also kind of our health goals. We hear this quite a bit on. So there are some pros and cons real quickly. Obviously when you are using sports nutrition that is packaged, you're getting a measured, accurate dose, or hoping that it's a measured dose or a combination of nutrients. It can be very consistent for those types of rides and races, and it's easily consumed and digested. If you've had a gel or that sort of thing before, you can definitely feel that hopefully you're getting that in pretty quickly, as well as but there is some risk of GI distress, and I'm sure we all have stories of that on the long end of our ride, right? So And then, so generally they are compact. These are all packaged type of fueling, portable, packaged for consumption, and usually used on the go. They also can contain these measured doses of ergogenic compounds that are known to be good in various situations. Some of the cons is that they could contain a lot of synthetic ingredients. They could lack things like micro or phytonutrients, minerals, essential for good overall just general health outside of racing and training. And then they could also cause GI distress. We did mention that. And then as far as what are some of the things that we could move into as far as thinking about real food, they're essentially fundamentally what our bodies are designed for eating and drinking, kind of this slower carbohydrate consumption. And they're often contain high percentage of water. So hydration can be a factor there. And they also contain wide ranges of micro and phytonutrients, like we're talking about some of the cons there. And real food is often more satisfying to eat and drink, but they can contain lots of fiber and other important organic matter. So it's important that we make some choices there. The thing about as far as nutrients are concerned, they're not always consistent with their composition, so we have to be careful and we have to kind of put together that plan as we go. It could also be difficult to understand the exact nutrient value of some different things. And a lot of times you just got to admit, sticking bananas everywhere in the back of your kit or big hunks of potatoes, as a lot of us have been known to do, can be tough to prepare or to transport. And they rarely contain high concentrated dose of ergogenic compounds such as coffee, unless you're sticking a whole, bottle of coffee in one of your water bottles. So really just what we want to think about is with shorter and longer durations, think about if there is a way you could put in real food. I think your body will thank you, or a mix of, early on, we have heard riders do more solid mixed foods, and then moving over to the more prepared science nutrition as in the form of gels and things like that later on in a race could be very, very useful to kind of give your body a chance to kind of, work at it both ways. And so with that, these sports nutrition products they don't ever contain any magical ingredients that dramatically boost your performance. They are just fueling us for our nutrition, but they do offer what's a convenient and a measured dose of the nutrients that we're looking to get during a certain time. So just looking out to the coaches here, just hoping to be able to share some of their stories of, using prepared nutrition versus kind of real nutrition on their rides and races in particular, I guess. Kind of what are your strategies?
I've been weird. I'll tell you, when I first started racing, it was pretty much peanut butter crackers and Gatorade.
Interesting.
Yeah. It turns out peanut butter crackers dry your mouth out a lot, and they're tough to suck down. But that was like really early on. And then I switched to the bars and gels, and then I switched off to a liquid nutrition, and then I've kind of gone back and forth because my stomach it kind of tells me what I need to do and what I don't need to do.
Yeah.
And it changes all the time. But I'll take bananas from time to time on a course. I found that I'm just not as much of a real food during a race guy. I went for a while using one product that was a Gen UCAN that I liked, but it caused some issues as far as some side effects that were not as pleasant around the house when I wasn't racing.
Yeah.
And it was a good product, but and I think too, for when you're racing at a very high intensity level, I found it very difficult. My system didn't like it as much as far as processing it quickly. So I've kind of gone back for this race to the old standby gels and bar / waffles, and that's what I'm going with for Worlds in a couple weeks.
Good to know. How about you, Andrea? I know you've got a race coming up. What's your plan? What's the fueling plan over there?
I definitely like to give myself options just to see how I feel, but I generally prefer just to see how my stomach is, how much sea I drank after the swim, get a little bit of hydration in, move to solids, but have options. Like I'll probably have 1 or 2 potatoes, a bit of nougat, and I'll have one bottle with Pepto Pro carbohydrate blend and the other with electrolytes, and then I'll get a gel in before the run. And I tend to run quite light, and I've trained to do that. I don't like taking a lot on when I'm running. So I'll if it's a half marathon, I'll take one gel and maybe just little bits of liquids. And I think mentally that's the hardest one, because you would rarely take much on when you're running sort of a 20K distance. But when we race, suddenly we're all panicked about how much we need to take. Yeah. And it's just trying to trust what your body is telling you about what it needs, depending on the conditions. Sometimes you're better throwing the water over you rather than overhydrating with what your system isn't used to. Now tomorrow we have very unusual conditions in Ireland. It's going to be very, very hot. So I'll definitely be more on top of my electrolytes and hydration, and just see how it goes. Just, I think you need to have a plan, but you need to be prepared to be flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, as far as making sure that you stick to a plan, it is always important that you make sure you kind of put that down, and then also be able to be adaptable. Because something may happen to the feed bag, and food may not be as prescribed on your race course. So just need to be careful of that, and just have those available. How about you, Tay? I know you've done some gravel grinders and things like that. We've talked a little bit about that. I know with some of the racing you do, it's hard to have kind of real food in those situations, right?
That's right. So my races are typically short, and the longest will be 3.5 hours. That's a gravel one. So I go for 100% liquid nutrition. I just do CarboPro mixed with my electrolytes, and then I'll have some gummy gels. I like to use glucose gels, and that's pretty much all I do.
Yeah. So just depending on the situation, and I know it's very touchy, or at least touch and go for those triathletes that are coming off the bike onto the run. I do hear a lot about riders trying to fuel on the bike as much as they can so that they have everything on board when they get to that run. So yeah, just some considerations there. Definitely check that out and make some considerations for you. We'll make a quick transition over here to Ian. And speaking about races and making sure that you're prepared, there are a couple stories we had in the forums about mechanical failures and a couple different things. So let's hear some tips on that, Ian.
Yeah, so one of the things, we've talked about maintenance before on your bike, but sometimes there's nothing you can do about it because the bikes don't always cooperate. And what's funny is I'll hear people talk about, well, I take care of my bike, I'll never have a problem. I'm pretty sure the mechanics for Team Sky are better than you. And if they have mechanical issues in a race, you're bound to have one at some point. So it's better to be prepared for it and understand that it's a problem that just may happen and you need to work through it. So we talk about different kind of things you can do. One is pre-checking your ride. I don't recommend taking your bike into the shop for a tune-up 2 days before a race, nope. A week or two in advance. But the day before the race and 2 days before the race, you definitely want to get out, make sure everything's tightened down, make sure everything's still good to go, make sure everything's shifting, that you don't have any brake rubs or wobbles or anything like that. So definitely pre-checking your ride will at least reduce the chances of having an in-race mechanical. Second is being prepared for some of the most common failures. And that's just simply by carrying your flats kit, your multi-tool wrench, things like that you can fix very small, maybe not hugely problematic issues, but things that are definitely going to affect the race. So if you can fix some of those on your own and you carry your tool, you're good. Now let's talk about getting into the actual race itself. When you get out there, the most common things that are going to happen most likely are, besides flats, are going to be a drop chain or a shifting issue. And the drop chain is actually generally easy to fix. You can most of the time fix it while continuing to ride. But if your chain is all really messed up, you're going to have to stop, put it back on, and get going. If you have a broken chain and you don't have a chain tool with you, well, your race is over. Just you're walking your bike in. Now, shifting problems can be a lot of different things. And with the advent of Di2 or the electronic shifting, that's led to a whole different host of problems. Now, from a mechanical shifting perspective, a cable can break, a cable can stretch. It can get some gunk on it if you're riding in bad conditions. So you have to try and work through those problems as best as possible. But at the end of the day, when you come into the shifting problem, if you can get yourself into a gear that you can use, a general gear, just go with it and stick with that. Otherwise, you're going to be just frustrated trying to shift all over the place and not be able to get into it. Or worst case is if you get stuck in a gear that's not a very good gear for general purpose, you'll be spinning out or mashing your gears, which is definitely not going to have a good thing or a good effect on your race. Now, when we talk Di2, the most common problem is a dead battery. So I highly recommend charging your battery up, a couple days before your race, just to make sure it's not going to die on you. Because once your battery dies, you're done. It's not shifting anymore. The second most common problem is the cable coming loose on the rear derailleur. Sometimes it will come loose and come out, but not completely out, so it looks like it's in. Or if you just ship your bike, you think you plugged it in, but you didn't plug it all the way in. And so that little connection is very important. So if you're having a problem shifting, you're pushing the button and not getting any movement, stop, get off your bike, calmly try and push the cable back in. Maybe it's just a connection issue, and then you can go on from there. If that's not helping anything, try to do a reset of the hub box using the power button underneath it. Sometimes that'll help. A lot of times you'll have to plug it back in though to get the box to reset.
Yeah.
Now, if you're able to reset it, great. If not, that's when you have to go into that decision to do a one by. And sometimes it's a one by front, and sometimes it's a one by back. And that's what you have to figure out quickly. If it's a one by back, you at least have the option of 2 gears. If it's a one by front, you should be able to run through your chain. If it's a one by one, that's when you're really in the worst situation. You can manually try and shift it over using your tools. That will definitely throw your derailleur out of whack for your next ride once you get it back. So you need to get back to the shop or get back on the stand to fix that afterwards. But you can, using your barrels there, adjust it up to an easier gear or a harder gear if you need to, if you're on a mechanical shifter. And if you can get the Di2, the derailleur, into its adjustment settings, you can adjust it even if it won't shift. So there are different things you can do. You can also try and bend the derailleur. I don't recommend doing that. But if you do get those things, you need to just figure out a way to bear with it and get through it. Now, other common things that do happen sometimes are your pedal comes off. I've ripped out a pedal from a crank before. That's fun. And it was just going up a hill early in a race, so that made it even more difficult. Those are the kind of things you're going to need to get race support for. So the biggest key that we're talking when you have these mechanical failures in a race is figure out how you can work through the problem. And if you can't, calmly wait for assistance. You don't want to pull Norman Statler in Kona about 10 years ago, where he just threw a giant, or 15 years ago at this point, threw a giant fit and slammed his $6,000 bike down on the ground 3 or 4 times, crying and screaming in German, which was funny to watch, but didn't really help us race at all. But yeah, so those are some of the things you need to look at and consider, and have a plan for it. If you're riding a mountainous route and you go one by into a hard gear, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, and it just may be time to call it a day. So think about all these things as you're going into a race. What's going to happen if, and make sure you're always prepared for that.
I think it is important to get a chance to either, if it's have it up on a stand and have someone show you if you move a barrel one way or the other, what it does. If everything's working and you yank the Di2 battery out, what happens? That sort of thing, just so that you, in your mind, have had it run through and somebody has shown you on a stand and you're pedaling and then, okay, this is what happens to the system. At least you have had some preparation on what's going to happen. So Di2 is a big concern with that. But if you get that charged, and it doesn't have to be the night before, like Ian said, it could even be 3 or 4 days. These batteries are made to last hundreds and hundreds of miles. So if it's fully charged, it's not going to die on you on the day of the race. So just be careful.
Yeah, no, and I don't recommend charging it the day before, because sometimes they have issues. So 3 or 4 days before is perfect.
Yeah. Some people have gone to the extent of having an extra battery, but with the technologies we have today, it's okay. And I think one thing, has anyone ran into or heard stories of issues of carrying or having these batteries transferred? Like, let's say, when you go to the race, Ian, do you keep all of your electronic batteries with you, so that when you fly with them, is there any issues with that sort of thing? I've heard some stories about that as well.
I leave mine on my bike.
Okay, so it's usually okay when it gets there. Okay. Yeah, I've just heard a couple of concerns with, getting all zapped with no power when they get there, and things aren't pairing properly because.
No, I charge it when I get back.
For the power meter, I think, Jason, that happened to me for the power meter, but not for the Di.
For the Di2 stuff, yeah. Okay, cool, excellent. All right, so your battery's all charged, Andrea. You all ready to go for tomorrow?
I don't have batteries, so I'm okay.
There you go. Fingers ready. All right, we're gonna switch gears just a little bit here, talking about pushing last intervals and kind of where we are mentally here in the game. So Taya's got some really great topics.
So we were saying that we had a lot of hard workouts this week in the lab.
Yeah.
And as we get through it, typically when you're getting towards the end of the workout, the legs are fatigued. And of course, this is by design, right? And just remember when you get to those final intervals that you're asking yourself, oh gosh, one more, I don't know if I can push through it. There's a lot of value in pushing through those last intervals when your legs are tired. When you think about it, when you're out there on the road in an event, or it could be a race, it could be a sportive, it can be anything. The moment where you have to push typically is when your legs are tired.
Yep.
Is at the end of it. Or you're having to close a gap or keep up with the group when you're already fatigued. So really having to push through those last intervals has a lot of value. So perhaps thinking about that as you go through it will make it a little easier for you to do it. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is why steady state riding isn't effective. There are a lot of classic workouts that you see out there in a lot of different training plans that will tell you to ride, the 2x20 minutes at a steady power, or 4x10s, or 2x30. The most recent school of thought is that that's really not the best way to train. Why is that? When you think about cycling is not a steady sport. When are you out there on a group ride or a race and riding steady? You're not even riding steady in a time trial or a triathlon, and Ian can comment on that as well. But really, what we need to do is train for how you ride and train for how you race. And that means including accelerations, including, going above threshold, recovering below threshold. Your recovery between intervals is at an endurance pace or sweet spot pace. So really you're training your legs to be able to manage higher levels of lactate. You're pushing above your threshold, you're flooding your legs, and you do it more and more and repeatedly. And then you come back and you clear that lactate also at a higher level in terms of power. So let's go to the classic over-under workout. You surge, let's say 1 minute at 125% of FTP, then you recover, quote unquote, at 90 to 95% of FTP, which is your sweet spot. So what you're doing effectively, you're training your legs to absorb that power, to be able to bounce from 90% to 120 and then back to 90 again. That's great training for your legs to keep you going and keep you going fast. So even when you have 30-minute intervals like the Century Prep workout that we have in the lab, remember we had 30 minutes at, let's say, 165, another 30 minutes at 180, another 100 minutes at 165 watts, is just an example. Even those intervals might sound like they're steady state, but they're not. What we're giving to you there is a floor to hold, but we're asking you to go out on a course, either out of erg and out of workout mode if you're doing it in Zwift, or go out on the road and keep that floor. But you're going to have changes in power. Your power is going to vary up and down. We're just asking you to hold that floor. So it's really not steady state on the number for 30 minutes. Right. So keep that in mind. That's also why you won't see steady state workouts in the lab.
Yeah. So one of the things I have to add there, Tay, is I completely disagree. I found when I do a number of cycling races, I generally ride steady state for the last third, as I am off the back, riding steady state just to try and get in.
I guess
no, that's a triathlon.
No, that's called working for your teammates and sitting up and going, my job is done. Thank you.
Yeah. So, this is definitely, between coaches, this conversation of, 2x20, as you evolve as a rider, starting off, just having that mental break of being able to do, whether it be at 2x10, times 15, times 20, and being able to put that power out is just that baby step. It's that step where you get that plan off of some internet.com saying this is the plan to make you fast. When you are able to do those sort of workouts and want to get to the next level, these more dynamic workouts that Taya is kind of describing, working with the terrain, rolling with those hills up and down, being able to change gears and keep that same power, let's say, or even as she described, being able to go above and below and having this bigger range to work through, and being able to do that is important, because that is in fact how, real group rides, real fondos, real races are. There should be a flux in power. However much we watch are the races on Zwift be just like the steady power. If in fact, you do have a group and a team, or have Ian there pulling for you, you should be able to get off the power, not completely, but be able to kind of taper that power and get that power down. I do remember vividly kind of here just about a week ago in the finals race for one of the CBR league races. I had 3 riders there with me, helping me get to that line. And I had to work very, very diligently to make sure that I was getting behind, whether it be a competing rider or one of my guys, to make sure I got, that less 1 watt per kilogram less, that half watt, whatever it was, to make sure I had what it took to get to that final piece. So that's where this really, really pulls in.
And Taylor's point about the long intervals with a given target, it's really critically important, especially from the triathlon perspective. For triathletes, we'll do when we do long course training, and I'm talking long course, I'm talking 70.3 or longer. So you're going to have to do long intervals. The goal is not to sit at X watt for 30 minutes. It is just that floor, because again, in every race, unless you're the dude off the front, you're not riding steady state. And even if you're on the front, unless it's a out and back one direction and then come back the same direction with no turns, you're not riding steady state. You're having to accelerate, decelerate, get around traffic obstacles, go through corners, go around people. People think passing is pretty quick, and it's easy. And granted, look, if I start towards the back of the field and the 3 fields in front of me are the 75 plus divisions, then great. Yeah, my passes on the bike are pretty quick. But when you're passing someone who's doing 0.2 miles an hour slower than you, you have to accelerate to get through that draft zone in 30 seconds. And that's a surge. And that's pushing you into that threshold or VO2 level that then you have to return and recover at that SST or just low SST, whatever your race pace is. So it is really important, and that people understand that when you have a long, steady, in quotes, interval, that it's not truly a steady interval. That's just you want to have an average or a floor of that target goal.
And this is also where being outside of erg mode, if you're doing it indoors, comes in, right? This is also why we stress not using erg. And at the beginning, that can be very upsetting and frustrating for people, because you're looking at those numbers and they just don't stay steady. They're moving all the time. But again, and then over time, you learn that it's not necessary to be a constant number. You're in very close to it, and you're perhaps skipping that floor. And even if you are, a couple watts above or below, 5 watts, 10 watts, you're still within the zone that you're supposed to be training in.
Right. Super important. Yeah, I think all really good comments all around. And I think it's just getting to that next level of training, challenging yourself to do closer to what we do actually on the road is really important. I had a question for Ian and Andrea for the passing in triathlon world. How do you make that decision to make that pass? Like, is you're behind someone for a certain amount of time, and you're dropping on power or your goals? Where is that decision made, and being able to have to go over?
For me, it depends a lot on what I'm coming up on. If I'm coming up on someone pretty quick, it's a no-brainer. I just go. I just boom, go, and that's the way it is. If I'm coming up on somebody who is maybe I'm not closing the gap quickly, I sometimes I'll look for what's the best opportunity. So for me, I mean, you can probably guess, as soon as the road pitches up, that's when I'm going to make my pass.
Yep.
But you have to stay out of the draft zone. So there is something you need to look at when you're doing this, to say, if I ease up to not pass this person now, how much is it going to break my rhythm? And do I want to try and do that? Or how hard is it going to be for me to make the pass at this time?
Got it. is it a counting of like, matches per se, like kind of when we're talking about having to go over, and can you only pass so many people, or you kind of keep that in your mind of how many people you had to really go over and pass like quickly and surging wise, or it's something that kind of just comes kind of flowing in freely?
For me, it kind of flows based on how I feel. Is there an aid station coming up? What's the traffic look like in front of me? How many people are there? Because sometimes I'll make a pass on someone who I'm only slightly faster than. I'll put the effort in to get around them before we come up on a big group of riders. Because then it just gets complicated and dangerous, and I'd rather be already past that person, and then I just get around the slower group. But that's more difficult to get around.
Interesting. That is a lot of thinking. A lot of decisions to me.
Battlefield calculus, man.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All right. Definitely super interesting comments there. So if you have any comments about the topics that we covered today, definitely drop them in the comment section. We can get back to that as well. We're going to slide on over to the Lab Rat of the Week, and we've got an interesting one because there was some really good input. So Taya, we've got a kind of a different award of who is the highlight of the week in the lab.
We have a lot of lab rats this week who are rats of the week, because we had a very interesting topic in the forum this week, which is your whys. Why do you do what you do? And we have got so many contributions from our lab participants. It has been an amazing thread. It's still going on, and just all around very inspiring. And I think that could be a great topic for us to cover here.
Absolutely. Yeah, when the question comes up with whys and your motivations to do things, it forces people to have a conversation with themselves of, different things, whether it's, like in my case, with my 5-year-old, and, wanting to be a good example, wanting to general health because of, my family history, those are really deep things that, people have to dig deep for. What have been some of the conversations that in the forum that we've had that have been kind of highlighting, or that have been kind of really outstanding out there for us?
Oh, we've had some great people out there who have come from a background of high performance athlete, then years later trying to get back into it, dealing with whether it's depression or just kind of that empty feeling from what they used to have when they were younger, and just trying to either compete or prove themselves that they still got it. It's pretty impressive, some of the whys, but yeah, it's interesting to see the different takes people will use to approach training and racing.
And I guess we could go ahead.
There was a lot of raw, open hearts, and I think it created a whole deeper connection for everyone, where, friendships and bonds rather than people that are just training with one another. I think when there's going to be more support for people as they face their races and challenges, that kind of came across to me.
Yeah, I think it definitely speaks to kind of understanding who a person is and why they're here. Obviously, by jumping into this sort of group, this kind of forum, as well as sharing the things that you're doing, it speaks to kind of wanting that extra step of camaraderie, or just support, and being able to explain, or to why you're here, is a good way to kind of open up. And so that is something that we could consider as we move forward and we add new riders to the lab. We always have a little introduction thing, just who they are and why they're here, but asking people's why and really getting people to open up or share their why really helps people feel like, okay, this is a comfortable place to be. Kind of, it's a safe place to talk.
Right. And the other thing is too, you might see a paragraph or 2 or 3 of somebody explaining their whys, but what we don't see is the amount of thinking that went behind that. To put that to write that down, there was a lot of, I think, introspection, and just really, it makes you know your whys, but really to make you translate that into words is a process, and that in itself is part of the journey. And the good thing about it is when you're training, when you're racing, remembering your whys, and those will keep you fulfilled no matter the outcome. It doesn't matter if you're in a podium. It doesn't matter if you won the race. What matters is your whys, and you're doing it for your whys.
I was watching a podcast from Training Peaks just before I came on the call, and it was about pushing through pain and performance. It's very, very good. Mm-hmm. And I think I know my goals, but she came up with your secret goal. So she was like, you might have this, I just want to finish. And then you find like you're 12th and disappointed. And she's like, you had a secret why, which was to come in a certain place. And I thought, I need to think about this one.
Well, that's actually an economics phenomenon. They call it the stated preferences versus unstated preferences.
Interesting. Yeah. You know, I deal a lot with this in the crit racing training that I do for a lot of riders, and I make them voice it to me. Like I will ask them, what will make this a successful race? You know, and to get past I just want to finish. Like I want to not crash. I'm like, no, we need to go deeper. Like, you know, do you want to work on your cornering? Do you want to make sure that you're carrying speed? Like, what are the things that you want to do better? And I always, after the rider race, get back with those riders and say, give me 2 things that you did really well that you're really, really excited about. And then I never really go back to like, where did you finish? But more so just like, did they reach the things that they said that they want to? And just reaffirm that. And that kind of just programs people to like, okay, I'm trying to do this. And I tried to, complete that. Okay, I completed that. Okay, that's good. And of course, you will always have these secret whys. You always want to finish first. Everyone wants to finish first, but the problem is there's only one person that finishes first, So, but all of us do this for all different kinds of reasons, So you have to come up with just, what's winning for you,
It's pretty simple for me. My goal is to crush my enemy, to see them driven before me, and to hear the lamentations of their family and supporters that are there.
You see, so Ian's the person who comes in first, and then that's it. There's no one else.
No, and I think it's interesting. There's different whys that people have to look at. Like I train, and I first of all, I said I like doing it. But for me, there's a couple different whys. One is I do it to keep myself sane. It's much safer for the general public when I get 500, 600 TSS. So for me, it's one of those things that helps keep me sane. But then when I race, my racing motivation of what makes me go hard, what makes me dig deep is completely separate from that. What the enjoyment is completely different from what I get when I train or go on group rides or things like that. And I mean, Jason saw a little bit of that when I was in California. I'm an intensely competitive person, and when I have the opportunity to crush somebody in a race style event, I love to do that. It's not because it makes me feel good because it's I'm making someone else bad. It's just I'm digging and testing myself, and I would rather beat somebody like at the line when we both are about dead and we try to go as deep as possible, and we both cross the finish line with like vomit coming out and need to be carted off. Because that tells me I got to dig as deep as I could, and my best bested his best on that day. I actually don't like it as much when I run away and win by minutes. I mean, I do when I'm angry, and that's another thing I will go into is I have a thing that I race angry, and I get grief all the time from friends and family that all of my pictures look like I'm not having a good time when I'm racing. And generally my best results are when I'm angry. And it's always something that has pissed me off. And sometimes I have to manufacture it. Sometimes it's what kind of audacity does this guy have to think he can be out on the bike in front of me, or he can be out in the run in front of me? Who does he think he is? Does he not know who I am? Whatever it is. I mean, I had a race in Santo Domingo where I used the anger of having to wait an hour and 20 minutes for a delayed start to just drive me to be pissed off the whole race. Wow. And I ended up winning that one by 4 minutes on an Olympic distance, 4 or 5 minutes on an Olympic distance race. It's been on a 5K that I've done where a guy will have baggy basketball shorts and headphones in, and he'll start out with me for the first 200 or 300 meters. And I just like, what the hell are you thinking? And I just hammer the pace and I'll crush it. But I'll manufacture that in my mind to draw on this inner just fire that sits there. But the hard part I have with that is if I know a person is just significantly stronger than me, I mean, I can't manufacture that fire from it. I mean, if I'm out there racing Lionel Sanders, there's no fire coming out of that because he's Lionel Sanders, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily have that same motivation to go quite as fast or quite as hard because mentally, I mean, mentally he's already got me beat because I mean he knows who he is. Now, if I see him falter, don't get me wrong, I will try and absolutely destroy any person on this planet if I can in a race if I see them falter.
You hear that, Lionel? I know you're listening.
Lionel, you need to come on the podcast and defend yourself because so far every race I've shown up to, you haven't been at. So I think you're ducking them, Lionel.
I'm just like you, Ian. I'm like you. You know, you look at my training and my racing, and I'm the same way. It's almost as if like I'm in beast mode when I go into racing. It's just it's like wartime.
That picture of Taya. Well, because I've ridden with Taya here, and it was all smiles. We're climbing for what was it forever? Remember? In Arizona, we're like, is this even up? I can't even imagine this is up, but it was all up. And then, but then we get this picture from the crit, the most recent one, and you were just like third wheel, and you were just super serious, intense. I could just see everything going on through your mind. I don't know. It was just super intense.
That's right. Yeah. My so I used to dance ballet right early on, and I did it for 15 years from age 7. And my ballet teacher used to tell me, you perform at your best when you're pissed off. Huh. And you also come up with the best choreographies when you're really mad. So, yeah. And but I do like Ian. I manufacture the anger in my head too, if I have to. But it sort of like comes in naturally. It's almost like I'm in here. The showing up to a race already has me in that state of mind.
See, and you guys all thought the coaches were level-headed and happy people.
Wow, I would be giving you guys a 10-mile berth.
Andrew races with a smile, I bet.
Yeah, I bet. It's got to be. Just smile and rainbows.
You got me thinking because, like, I'll spend a lot of time focusing ahead of the race on like energy. Where can I create this abundance of energy and where is it coming from and feeling in that state? So like just feeling so strong, so fast, so great. But, you know, I think there's a part of me that it wants carnage at the end of the line. And Ian is kind of that, maybe there's a bit of a secret why there where I'm very much, I'll set my goals at the beginning of the season. They're highly specific and I'm afraid of them afterwards. So then I focus on the process. And I'll have a green box every way across Training Peaks. I love the whole focus of the training and, you know, every hard session you can tell yourself, well, there's no excuse now in a race. I got through that pain, bring it in. So then I'll transfer that process into my feeling focused visualizations. But I think a little bit on race day, yeah, I want to do it all justice. So there is a competitive nature that I think I'm a little bit scared of. So we'll see. It's all evolving, isn't it? As you realize you can, and you want to keep pushing that boundary. And I'm wondering, with the two of you, are you using anger to create a neural pathway that you don't feel pain? I don't know. I don't know enough about neuroscience, but it can take you into that zone and you're distracted because you're channeling.
There's definitely no pain.
It's sheer joy when I hear someone go, back.
That is so funny. That's so funny. Yeah, and having experienced it firsthand, I remember we were doing the last segment of climbing with Ian when he was here, and he was asking, some of the guys were like, oh, I think we're going to try to go ahead. And Ian's like, yeah, let them go, 5-10 minutes, whatever. We let them go, and we ended up catching them. I'm sure it was like pure joy for Ian just to catch the local guys that we let go. Like, it felt like we just went to go like have a meal, come back, and like we were able to go catch him on this 40-minute climb.
It may have felt really good, and I may have hit the gas when I caught him and went over the top.
Oh, we all did. We all stood up. They all hated it. They all remember it to this day. That was the hardest ride of their life. There's 4 or 5 people that we brought on that ride. They still, when I see them, they're like, that was the hardest ride of our life. And then here, and then one more example.
Discard for life.
Yeah. And then, so we're doing last one before we go, is we were doing downhill stuff. So you're like, oh, you know, big guys, lots of aero, right? So everyone's all tucked in and big. And I was behind Aaron Stifferman, huge, awesome powerhouse going downhill. All of a sudden we see this little guy, this little Ian, like laying down on his frame, on the side of his frame, just holding on to the handlebars, coming by us, going downhill at like 50 plus miles per hour. Ian's like is barreling next to us, getting all this speed. You think like these little guys will get like poked up and just like not able to keep up, but Ian is just like hammering. I have it on video. It's an amazing sight. Ian going downhill.
I want to see that video.
I'll have to send it to you. It was fun.
If there's two people, it's a race.
Yeah, it is. All right. So fun time today here in the Coach's Corner. I hope everyone had a great time. Some really great conversation. Not all of this ends up being really, I guess, technical information as far as wanting to get better or get faster. I think it just has to be with a conversation with yourself of kind of your goals, of the things that you want to do, and how do you get there. And like Andreas talked about, kind of the process. And so really take the time the way we do to talk to you guys or talk to yourself to just get an idea and think outside the box to get to your goals. So on the horizon next week, we've got our third week here in the lab. For those in the lab, we've got a recovery week. So we've got cadence drills, we've got seated standing sprints, which are great. Making sure you hit those targets. And then we've got a 12:43, 12-minute tempo workout. Time trial. Yep. And then a couple optional easy rides in between. And so with that, I wanted to make sure that those that are counting your TSS and doing longer events, make sure that you are tapering that TSS on the weeks that are recovery. So count what you have done this week and last week, and make sure you are cutting that a good amount for this recovery week. So you may not be doing as much TSS. So I hope some of those riders are getting a better feel for how you feel on the second week on these cycles, as well as how it feels to have a certain amount of TSS in your legs, in your bodies, in your arms, in your legs for running, biking, and swimming today.
And it is as much as a physical break as it is a mental break, because there's also the mental effort that's needed for all that training, right? So the recovery week is also for your mind.
Absolutely. This is also a time to not load up on all the stuff that you haven't done at the house or unpacking
in the garden.
Yes, in the garden. That tends to add stress outside of your TSS cycling, running, and swimming stress. So just keep it kind of even pace. So and make sure that you take the time to take this little bit of break. We've got another build cycle coming up here soon. All right. Was there anything else here from the coaches that we want to bring up before we go?
Good luck, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Good luck. We look forward to your report as you come back, and next week it'll be an exciting time to hear how well things went. We are all sure that you are representing all of us there on the line.
Oh, no pressure.
Hey, and if it comes down to the sprint for the end, make sure that the elbow for whatever side your opponent's on goes a little wide and high.
Elbows out.
Okay.
Elbows out.
You would love the run, Ian. It's 5K up a hill, 5K down. So you're really rolling.
Nuts. It's nuts. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us here today in the Coach's Corner. If it's your first time listening and would like to hear more content from the Endurance Lab, head over to your favorite podcast app, search Endurance Lab, head to YouTube, search the same, and click subscribe. For more information on when the next lab is, head over to endurancelab.fit. Learn where you can join us to train smart, learn more, and get results. We'll see everybody next week.